family, welcome back to our last of 3 talks. I hope that you were able to enjoy the first 2 talks that we offered. The first one was on a document by Pope John Paul II. Then the second talk was on a combination of a document from the Pontifical Congregation for Institutes of Religious Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, and then a letter to consecrated people by Pope Francis. Today, we're actually moving, I'm stretching you a little bit, we're looking into the same realities that the first 2 talks looked into, which is the relationship between consecrated people and lay people, but we're looking at it from a canonical standpoint. There's been a lot of questions throughout the past few years, and especially in the past few months, trying to really understand a little bit more what is the relationship between the AVI sisters and brothers and the family. So this talk is supposed to unpack with you and for you this document written. It's an article written by Sister Amy Hereford. She is a theologian and a canon lawyer. She lives in St. Louis. And she's been helping out for many, many years. A lot of religious communities understand and navigate their relationship with their associates. So we sisters ourselves read all these documents over the summer, read them, prayed over them, prayed with them in the chapel, in the Adoration Chapel, and then we came together during our General Assembly to discuss them. The Italian family has done the same during the summer, and now this is where we are at with the American family. So we are walking with you through these talks. Now, I would like to make a premise like I did in the past 2 talks, but repetita iuvant, as the Latin used to say, like it's important to repeat. In a special way, because today we're entering a little bit more in this canonical language. So just to clarify, first of all, that the relationship between consecrated people and laity goes back to the very first centuries of Christianity. Think about the first fathers and mothers of the desert that were living out in the desert, and lay people would just come and try to associate with them. So really from the very beginning. So that's the first point to keep in mind, that what we AVI sisters and the family are doing is simply walking in the footsteps of centuries of tradition in Christianity and in the Catholic Church. The second premise is that the language that we are going to use today is, as we did in the past, is analogous, because if you remember from the previous talks, we sisters are recognized and approved by the Diocese of Rome as a private association of the faithful. The family does not have a canonical status. Now, this article that we're going to look into looks at the relationship between an institute of religious life and their associates that often are connected through a private association of the faithful. So again, what we're looking at is the same interval, okay? So religious institutes or societies of apostolic life that have associates with them. So we sisters are not this and the family is not this, but in an analogous way, you take that interval down to the relationship between the sisters and the family, then this will fit. So again, every time you will hear during this article the word institutes or institutes of consecrated life or religious life, just substitute that in your ears as you're hearing them with the word community, because that will make the connection easier. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So we are now going to this document that Caitlin, thank you again, Caitlin, for helping out. Caitlin is going to share on your screen. So like we did in the past, she's going to walk you through this. Now, this is a rather long article, but what I did back in the summer, I went ahead and highlighted the important points that I would be covering. I will send this document to you, and I can send it in a non-highlighted way so that you can walk your way through it. Or if it helps, I will also send the highlighted part. I think it makes it easier because a lot of these things just don't apply to us, so I'm going to skip over them. So I hope it's helpful. So I'm mostly going to comment on what's highlighted, and I hope you'll be able to follow and actually enjoy. There's a lot in this article that I feel is very helpful. So first of all, she starts with a background comment saying that from the very beginning of religious life, men and women have associated with religious orders. Again, we go back to the early centuries of Christianity. And then she says that today, many religious institutes in the United States have associates. Although the level of organization and the clarity of roles and responsibilities vary from one institute to the other. And so this is where she's actually doing a very good job at trying to cast the net really wide, because she's looking into the relationship that some very large religious institutes have with their associate programs, as well as very tiny communities that are, newer. So she's trying to catch a little bit everybody. As a matter of fact, you can see, she says, for some institutes or for some communities, the entire documentation on association is a brochure and a page on the institute's website. So you might have those communities that have everything planned out, everything is clear, they have statutes, they have a lot of clarity. And some others just have a pamphlet, some of them just have a couple of lines on the website. So as for our sisters, back in, I think, 2012 or 2013, when we were redoing our website, we started out strong. A lot of people were helping to get the family and collaborators page ready for our website, and it's still there. Let's say that it probably fell a little bit through the cracks. No one really took the reins in the past 5 or 6 years. So the page is still there, still pictures, but they're kind of old. So it's not uncommon, if you will, to see that there's some struggles in a lot of communities and a lot of groups to have someone that will be consistently able to volunteer and to help out with things like this. So, and she says it's not uncommon actually for several sets of documents to exist, many unsigned or undated, some with conflicting information. It sounds like us. It sounds a little bit like, the beginnings of the family and your relationship with the Italian sisters that are known maybe not to be super organized. So, but this is the reality, right? So this is where we are at, and I think a lot has been done throughout the years. We've come a long way from where we were in terms of organization, but there's room for growth. As you scroll down into that page, Sister Amy says that association is a movement which has developed organically in response to the desire of religious institutes to share their mission and spirituality, coupled with the desire felt by many individuals to grow in their spiritual life and to share in the mission of religious institutes. So very often, realities like the family and many others, they were not born because someone sat down one day and said, okay, we need to do something here. But it was born of a common desire for the religious and the consecrated people to share their lives more with the lay people, and for the lay people to come and cooperate and spend time together. I actually remember I was in Illinois where our first where we first landed in the US, and that's how we started. We didn't call them collaborators of your joy at the time. We actually called them friends of the apostles of the interior life. And we suggested, we knew that Americans are big on acronyms. We said, okay, friends of the apostles of the interior life, fail. And someone shook their head and said, oh, maybe not. And someone else said, well, but that's actually a good name to think that, we're not even afraid of failure. But what I do remember about those meetings was that we would just go and announce it, and people, students and faculty and staff and lay people from the parishes nearby would just come and gather once a month. So this was kind of like the very first Collaborators of Your Joy. Very similar structure. We would give a talk and then pray together, play some music, and then sharing time. So this goes back to 2001. So it's been around for quite some time. She says, again, it's difficult to write an article that would fit for everybody. But one thing that I would like to get your attention to is that figure that you see on page 5, where she's describing that, at least in the United States, there's been a decrease, a constant decrease in the number of vowed members of religious institutes. And as those numbers have gone down, though, the number of lay people associated has increased. So you see that in the lighter color of the curve going down, of the graph going down, but then the darker color is the number of associates. And so if you see in the past about 20 years, you've seen a steady decline of numbers in consecrated life, but actually an increase in the number of the associates of the lay people. Now, I'm gonna turn the camera to this little board. Those of you who know me well know that I love graphics. I love to use boards. And I would actually say that for us at EI, thank God, we don't so much have that problem in the sense of our numbers as a community are going up because the Lord is just sending vocations, and we don't have that tradition of having been around for 200-300 years, and we didn't go through the dip after Vatican II. So I would say that the number of sisters started with Susan and Tiziana, and so it's slowly increasing. Now the blue is the sisters, the orange will be the family. And so what you saw, especially, so this is pretty much when we started in 1980, it's the beginning, then you can put, the year 2000, and now here we are, 2020. But something happened with the beginning of the family, we began in the early 2000s in Lawrence, and then when the family finally was established, it started and then it went up. So I think I recall it was maybe it was 2017 or whenever, and then 2019, a lot of people became members of the family. And so here you see the difference, if you will, of numbers between the family and the sisters. Now, I don't know if this helps you visually. I'm a huge visual learner, so compared to the graph that you saw, this is actually more what our reality is. Now back to the document, Sister Amy says that as the associate movement matures, so in this case we're talking specifically about the family, many recognize the need to clarify roles and relationships and to develop an organized structure for the protection of both associate and religious institutes. And this is something that was understood earlier on. Sorry, Caitlin, I'm just noticing, do you mind minimizing the image so that people can actually read the document? So they don't really need to see my face right now. So if you don't mind minimizing that so that people can see just the full document. I don't know if that's working or not. I'll just continue. Hopefully that will, it's just on my screen that I see my face on top of the text. Anyway, so Sister Amy says that in exploring the canonical issues raised when discussing the relationship between communities and their associates, in this case for us a family, conflict may arise between the requirements of law and the practices and hopes of those involved in the associate movement, both the vowed members and the associates. Why it is important then to do what we're doing is really to reflect on where we've been and where we're going. So there is a desire, there is a growing desire to clarify and really to find the identity. Who is the AVI family? Who are the members of the AVI family? So now, Sister Amy now is going to take us on a historical journey, panoramic view of what has happened in the history of the relationship between lay people and consecrated people. So I'll leave that to your own personal reading if you're interested. So we're going to skip ahead, skip over page 6, where she looks back at the history of that relationship, and we're landing on page 7, where now she's talking about the canonical relationship. And so she's giving a little bit of a framework. And in this case, I would like for you again to read, every time you hear religious institute, just think, the community, the AVI, and every time you hear associates, think family. So here, Sister Amy, first of all, is just giving an understanding of what consecrated life is. And so who are the consecrated people? So these are people that have given their lives in a stable form of living, the Canon 573 says, in which the faithful are following Christ more closely with the profession of the evangelical councils. And then, the canons that follow just describe more in depth the intimate life of a religious community. And we sisters have a lot in common. If you look at, the structure of our life, the structure of our formation, the structure of the governance in the community, that we have a superior that has been elected, and then we have the council sisters, and we have a general assembly. Some communities call it chapter, some others general assembly, but still the same concept. And so I'm going to skip over this. This is not necessarily relevant to what we are talking about, but again, if you're interested, if you're just curious to know how communities function and work, page 8 gives a very good description of communities and how they are organized. But then on top of page 8, she says, by comparison, the associates, so in this case would be the family, in most religions, the associates of the communities are much less organized. Often associate programs developed organically with little documentation, especially at the beginning. There may or may not be a statement of what associates are and what they do. Actually, as I'm becoming more and more familiar with the family since last year, I found that the little card for the promises on the back, there are like belonging to the family, and it explains what does it mean to belong to the family? What are the things that we are encouraged, that you guys are encouraged to do and to live out. And yeah, so Sister Amy now tries to, again, apply the wide net to describe as much as possible this type of relationship between consecrated people and the associates, the lay people. She says in some institutes, the associates, in this case the family, make voluntary commitment to the religious institutes, and they vary different ways. But the bottom line is that they desire to live the charism of that community. And this is though in contrast with the vowed members, because we live the evangelical councils, we make those promises. You guys are called to live them as lay people, but you live a different vocation, and therefore, you're not bound by, poverty, chastity, and obedience, of course, as we sisters are. Now, at the bottom of page 8, she goes into a little bit now. She's starting to shift gears, saying that the organization and the governance of the associates often is not clearly laid out. So I actually feel that the fact that we've had a family council for several years, we're already ahead of the game compared to where a lot of communities and their associates began. So we are already in a pretty good shape with the fact that we have clarified and put in place the beginning, the budding, if you will, of a structure. And she says that the leadership of the associates often is provided by the institutes. So either a member of the institute is the director, or an associate, in this case, a family member. If you see, I removed the paid for by the institute. You're probably going to laugh about this. You all know that there's no money traveling around when it comes to the AVI sisters. So everything is done on a volunteer basis. And so that's why I removed that. But again, so often the head of the associate movement is actually one of the brothers or one of the sisters of the community, or sometimes an associate is chosen, and the organization and leadership often relies heavily on the institute's structures. Self-governance of associate programs is an exception. So this begins to delineate a little bit the relationship. It's important to understand that when we sisters are present to the AVI Family Council, to the meetings, it's certainly not because we want to, impose or lord it over, but it's really more like a parent that is accompanying the child in the process of growth. And if you will, this might be more of a time of the adolescence where, the child feels that they want to be more independent, and they can and should be to an extent, but they can't just do, anything and everything on their own, because they are still dependent on the parents. And so if any of you has had teenage children, you know that also what that feels for the parent to learn how to let go of their children while at the same time still being present to them. And also the always fine line of remaining the parent and not morphing into the best friend. So kind of like keeping the roles distinct, but in relationship. Okay, so now moving to page 9, the Code of Canon Law offers some indications on the associations of the faithful and also the relationship with the communities. But as you can see, she says that the code cannot address the reality of associates of religious institutes as they have evolved. Why? Well, because the Code of Canon Law was promulgated in 1983. Now, a lot of these relationships among associates and communities have actually developed more and more in the late 90s, in the early 2000s. So the Code of Canon Law is, having been promulgated in 1983, of course, could not yet describe what had yet to come. And so even for us AVI sisters, the very budding of the community starting in 1980 when Susan traveled from California to join Father Salvatore. And then a couple of years later, Tiziana came along, and then Simone, and then Loredana, and then little by little, all of us. But again, the Code of Canon Law cannot fully describe yet the relationship as it's evolving, because there's a lot that has been happening in the past 40 years. And sure enough, that's exactly, if you will, where the AVI family fits in this development. And Sister Amy also says that it should be a blessing for both in this case, it would be for the sisters and the family, as they share the two distinct ways of living the charism of an institute. I hope you remember the talks that I already gave, and if you haven't had a chance to watch them, please go back. where I talk about the unique richness that the lay people can bring and have brought to the AVI charism. So we have two distinct, not separate, but two distinct ways of living out the charism. She says, however, if there are no boundaries, the specific identity of each becomes blurred, and this presents challenges which need to be understood and addressed. She will, later on, we're going to go into like 3 models. She will talk about the embedded model. So let us turn to, we can just skip over page 10. There's a little bit more of canon law, but one thing that you will find on page 11 that is important is talking about those associations that have not yet sought or received a canonical identity. And this is where the family fits. So she says that even if an association has not gone through the formalities of creating a statutes and submitting for the review or approval of the church, the association may exist de facto, like as a fact, it exists. And so actually the Code of Canon Law has something to say about these associations that are born naturally, which, by the way, Christian faithful have a right built in their baptism to associates. So no one should ask permission to form an association. Now, there's a natural, if you will, right to that, but then you don't have necessarily the right to speak on behalf of the church. That's why an association would then go through the steps of seeking canonical recognition in order to be able to say, okay, I was recognized and approved by the church. But again, the canon law provides a safety net saying, okay, there are associations that exist de facto, and the family is certainly one of them. And Sister Amy says this Canon 310, seems to describe groupings of persons like modern associate groups who have not sought or obtained canonical approval. Again, the family might or might not, in 10, 20, 30 years, seek canonical recognition in the future. But what we sisters can say confidently is time is on our side. Never rush through anything. There's no rush. There's no need to put ourselves in a canonical box. For you to put yourself in a canonical box, just continue to live out and to think and to pray and to spend time together and to reflect and to do what we are doing, what we will be doing on Saturday with all hands and hearts on deck, where we try to reflect on this reality of the family. Okay, so moving forward, I really would like, and again, this is all a great article, so if you do have the time, please read through it. So let's move to page 13 now, where there's actually a reference to the document that we first heard about in the first talk, Vita Consacrata by St. John Paul II. So Sister Amy is actually drawing exactly on the same paragraphs that I had highlighted. So needless to say, when I came across all these documents during my prayer and research over the summer, and it was so encouraging to see that documents that I found on different resources, they all pointed in the same direction. So that to me was a further confirmation that that this was indeed inspired by the Holy Spirit. So at the top of page 13 on the right, this is where Sister Amy offers 3 different models of association over time. So she's now, after having walked us through the history of how lay people associate with religious orders, now she's going to look at how, not just what, but how has this relationship developed throughout the years. Now, the first model that she offers that she analyzes is the individual in relationship. So this is where there are, the relationship is not really as a group, but each individual that relates to a religious community. So she says, this may occur through a long-standing relationship with a particular ministry or house of the institute. So this is, those individual friendships. And as I was praying through this, I just thought this is really what the co-joy is. Collaborators of your joy, there's no particular commitment. You just show up if and when you desire it. You might be able to come for a month and then you don't show up for 3 months and then you come again. There's open doors policy. There's no commitment whatsoever. And so it's the individual that relates to that charism because they see that there's something unique about that charism that is attractive. And I believe that many of you have eventually joined the family through this first step of getting to know the sisters or the brothers, or having known the charism through other family members and have come to explore, maybe at Convivenza or a co-joy or a parish mission or through friendships or your relatives. So this is the first model. And some communities actually have just that. Some communities are totally okay with simply relating to individuals as they come and go. So that's the first model. Then the second model that Sister Amy talks about is the embedded model. So this is where there is a desire and intent to develop an associate program with some kind of organization. It's funny, when I read this article, I'm like, I wonder how many dysfunctional, unstructured groups has she seen. Because the way she's describing sounds very much like a lot of, attempts and to get something together, to get something going. So the embedded model, as she says, there are different relationships. There are programs that invite individuals to become associates. There are criteria for who can become an associate. So for us, like the program is that time of formation, those 16, 18 months that all of you had to go through while discerning, going to formation talks and doing apostolate together, living the community aspect together. Then some criteria for who can become an associate. For us, it was having lived at least 1 year as a collaborator, or have been in spiritual direction and having known the brothers or the sisters for a longer period of time. Then again, some orientation program for those who wish to become associates. We have that with those 18 months of formation. Expectations of those who are associates. So this is important because this defines the difference between someone who just simply comes to collaborators and enjoys the charism, enjoys the talks, and someone instead who desires to take a deeper plunge, to take a deeper step, because this charism not only has attracted them as something beautiful to look at from the outside, but this charism has begun to knock at the door of their heart and has begun to transform their spiritual life and their life in general to the point where they want to be part of it. And so at that point, when you become part of a family of any kind, and for us the name is actually family, then there are some expectations. For example, I remember someone telling me once, when you go over to someone's house, they invite you for dinner, they say, you should always ring the doorbell with your elbow. I say, why is that? Well, because your hands are full, you're bringing things. So you ring the doorbell with your elbow, meaning you're bringing something to contribute. And so this is a very important element of you being family members, is that you're not only recipients and receivers, but throughout the years, we've been inviting you to give back. And some of you have done a lot of that, sometimes overdoing it, sometimes, really investing so much time and energy Someone else maybe has not really had that opportunity yet to step up and help out. But there are some kind of expectations. Like, again, if you go over to your in-laws for Thanksgiving meal, I guess you're expected to bring something, we all contribute something. So those are the expectations to be part of the family. So what are they? Well, for us is to, try to get together on January 1st when we renew the promises, or if you can't be in person, to do some kind of phone call or zooming in so that you can renew your promises together. A small group has been like the backbone of the family in recent years, because that's where we're really known and loved and treasured and listened to. So Sister Amy, though, as she explains this, this model of how it's developed, she says, because of a lack of documentations, it is not uncommon for various members and associates to have differing understandings of the nature of the relationship and of the expectations of the community and of the associates. This diversity and these differing expectations can raise concerns on the part of members. It is not uncommon that practices develop informally without any specific process of discussing practical aspects of concern. And I feel that this is where we found ourselves more recently. One comment that I heard a few times from some family members was, well, I thought that with me taking promises in the family, that would automatically guarantee that I would get one of the brothers or the sisters as a spiritual director. So, and my heart sinks when I hear that. Why? Well, because I know how unrealistic that is, because the sisters and the brothers have not grown at the same rhythm of the family. If you remember the graph that I showed you earlier, the sisters and also the brothers were growing very slowly, and then the family went up, spiked up, and there's a huge gap. So there's just no way that we can do that. So, but the question is, was that ever explained? Were there some unspoken expectations, or maybe have we led someone on unintentionally, making them believe that, yes, if you sign up and if you become a family member, the brothers or the sisters will come to your children's baptisms or confirmations or first communions, or will be able to come and spend time with you, and you will be able to lead you in spiritual direction. If we have, I know on behalf of the sisters, I can certainly apologize. We were never able to make that promise, but whenever we can, absolutely, we've tried our best. But again, it's important, as Sister Amy says, it is not uncommon that there are maybe different expectations. And so it's so important to clarify and to be honest and to say, you know what, this hurts that I haven't been able to see the sisters in person in a long time. And also, Sister Amy, the way she's describing this is also about the nature of the relationship and the expectations of the community and the associates. Several people in the past few months have asked, so what are we as a family? Are we a third order? Are we an ecclesial family? Are we a movement? So again, some confusion. Maybe someone heard or thought that we were going in this direction, and then turns out we're not. And so there's some people are disoriented, going like, wait, I thought that we were a third order, or I thought we were an ecclesial family. I thought we were a movement. Well, all I can say is that these three that I just mentioned, and maybe people have other, groups in mind, but all of these that I'm just describing, third orders, ecclesial family, movement, they're all canonical entities. So these are all realities that have been recognized and approved by the church. As it stands, the family is not yet. We've mentioned that several times. it takes many years of living out a reality before we can actually put it in a canonical place, box, if you will. And then there's also that's what we think. And then we bring it to the church and say, okay, now church, you discern, who are we? And so that's why a recognition and approval of the church is necessary, because it's not enough for a group to say, okay, this is who we are. Well, that's step number one. But step number two is for the church to recognize it. This is the same as any young man that desires to enter the seminary, and he needs to go through the application and says, okay, I feel that I discern a vocation. Well, that discernment needs to be coupled with the discernment that a bishop and a vocations director make. And when they match, then they're moving forward. And then that same discernment happens before ordination, when a young man might say, okay, I feel called to the priesthood already. And then, the formation team at the seminary, along with the bishop and vocations director working team, to say, okay, yes, we recognize and approve, we confirm of this. So again, the family officially is walking the journey, and the Holy Spirit is blowing very strongly. So I hope and pray that as we continue to journey with you, we will be able to see you, understand more and more, okay, what is the family? What will the family be canonically? As of now, the family is a group of amazing lay people that are living out the AVI charism, because this charism has touched their lives. And so this desire that we have is to rekindle that flame and to reconfirm this flame that is alive. Now, as Sister Amy continues to describe the embedded model that has developed in some communities, in some groups, you see it on page 14 in figure 4. She says, in the late 1900s, so 1980, so again, this is about the time when the Code of Canon Law was described. You see, this big graph with the big members, and then you see a little group of associates inside. Then she moves 20 years later. The members are shrinking because, again, a lot of communities are, the older members are dying, but the associates are growing in number. And then you see the projection of 2020, which is actually right now, where the associates have actually come to embrace the members, because the associates continue to grow and the members continue to shrink. And now it looks like the associates are almost in this model taking over even the life of the religious communities. And so she's going on the next page describing the challenges of this model, where in some communities, associates were then brought more and more into leadership position, even within the communities, where there was almost a schizophrenic experience where there was no time for the sisters or the brothers, whichever community she was referring to, just to have time by themselves, because their institutes became so open to associate members that there was little to no time for these communities to just live their consecrated life by themselves. So this is the embedded model that she's describing. But we move to page 16, and this is where, when I first read this document, this article, and then I shared it with the sisters, I said, okay, this is what we desire. So if this is the only thing that you remember from this talk, this is it. So she says we turn now to an alternative model that starts with the premises of the embedded model, but she says as time goes on, there is an impetus to develop leadership and self-governance among the associates. The group is encouraged to develop its own statutes and self-governance and begins to take responsibility for its own finances and for the recruitment, screening, and orientation of new associates. The associates remain in relationship with the institute and its members, even as they begin to explore the leadership and future of the movement. So this is what has happened in the past few years with us sisters saying, okay, family, it's time for you to begin to take on a leadership role. We're still going to be here walking with you, but we want to see you taking on a role. And this is where the Family Council was born. And Troy did a very good job in leading the Family Council, and so many of the Family Council members just helping out, still under the supervision of the sisters that have been helping out with the family all these years: Susan, Loredana, Michela, Clara, Elena, Father Alessandro, Father Joel, and then myself. So this is the desire, the moment that moving towards the family, taking on an understanding of her own reality. And Sister Amy says this will require a paradigm shift for both for the associates and the vowed members. And then here, she goes into saying that often the materials inviting new associates emphasize that there is no financial commitment and there are no expectations. Associates are invited to decide for themselves what they will do. But she says, if, however, the associates are to become a stable, sustainable group, they will have to take responsibility for their own sustenance. And this will involve, both on the financial level. And this is actually, honestly, when a few years ago, you might remember dues were introduced. Now, maybe it's because I'm not a native speaker, but when I hear the word dues, I cringe. And I know it's probably the correct technical term in English, but it makes me cringe because when I hear the word dues, it makes me think of something that is owed, that, it's mandatory. Whereas I would like for these dues to be more of a donation that you give to the family to cover those costs for, retreats, covering costs for booking rooms or mailings, or sometimes actually to help others in the family that are struggling. And we sisters know a lot of situations or a lot of family members that throughout the years have been in need, and we've helped directly or indirectly. And the Italian family does the same. Whenever there is a retreat, family members are invited to, even if they are not attending the retreat, to give like a scholarship for those family members that cannot attend. So if you ever wonder what are these dues about, that's really what it is. Just taking on more of a responsibility financially to realize, okay, this is a reality I'm part of. And although, I might not be there in person, so it's not, I don't use photocopies, so why should I pay dues? Again, I think that if you guys can figure out a better word to call this that is not dues, let me know, because I'm a little bit cringing on that. And as we're concluding now, Sister Amy says, as associates, like in this case would be the family, develop their own leadership and infrastructure, they will begin to have some autonomy from the founding institute, or in this case, from the AVI sisters. As this happens, it will be important to stay in dialogue with the religious institute so that both groups can maintain their ties and strengthen their relationships. So later on, she says, both the religious institute and the associates have the opportunity to develop the infrastructure that will be appropriate to their own needs. The two groups remain in relationship from a position of strength, each maintaining necessary autonomy and together collaborating in areas of mission and spirituality. So this is really the desire where, the family can stand on its own legs and develop its own structure. And that's the idea of, as we're rethinking the family council, where there will still be one of the sisters present. But if you remember what I shared in the last talk, it's not anywhere where the sisters are on top, but rather it's a circle. And if you remember, I put the sisters at the bottom of the circle. It's almost like an anchor, because in the talk, I explained that in the first talk that our vow of obedience, the sisters' vow of obedience, is the anchor that keeps the family connected to the church. Because right now, because the family is not a canonical entity, the only thing that right now can guarantee that the family is acting directly connected to the church is by being rooted and anchored in this relationship with the sisters. But again, the sisters are at the bottom, they're not at the top. We are here to serve you and to continue to walk with you. Now, one final comment here is page 17, Sister Amy answers some frequently asked questions. And actually, I found it interesting because it seems that she speaks directly to a question that we sisters also heard over the summer, and that might have created some confusion. So I actually was smiling when I saw this, and she wrote this article in 2012, so back then. And one of the most common questions that she's asked is, are associates members? She says, regarding whether associates are members, I have to respond, members of what? Are they members of the religious institute? Clearly not. Is there an associate organization they can join? If so, they may be members of that organization if they meet the criteria for membership. Some institutes develop the concept of an overarching umbrella structure, which includes vowed members and associates. However, generally, this overarching structure is merely a mental construct, and one cannot be a member of a mental construct. So clarity and consistency of language is important because language gives rise to understanding and expectations, both internally and externally. So the question that was asked at some point was, have the sisters changed the name of the family? Because some people had thought that they couldn't call themselves family members anymore. So once again, I would like really to speak truth into this. No, your name has never changed, and nothing has changed ever. So you are members of the family of the Apostles of the Interior Life. So thank you so much again. Thank you, Caitlin, for all the help you've given us. And as always, please send feedback. I've heard from some of you. I would love to hear from more. You have my email. My phone number has been out there. And make sure to put it again on the email that will accompany this talk. Thank you so much, and God bless.